Welcome to the Lady Landlords podcast, where we empower women to gain financial independence through real estate investing. I'm your host, Becky Nova, founder of Lady Landlords. If you're ready to buy, manage, and grow your real estate portfolio, then let's get started.
It took just one showing to fill my most recent vacancy. And today, I'm going to tell you how I was able to do that. Hopefully, you'll be able to pick up some things that maybe you're going to be able to implement into your own tenant screening process that will be helpful for you. So, recently had a vacancy come up, and this was something that I was honestly not expecting. We had a tenant that was fantastic in that unit for the past year. All signs said that she was really going to be able to stay. That's what the communication was, because I knew that she was happy in the unit. But all of a sudden we got right down to the wire when that lease had to be renewed. And then all of a sudden she said, that's it. She was actually moving in a few days. So totally fine. I'm really happy. She had some really cool life changes. And I'm really glad that she was able to move forward with what was happening in her life. But now I was left with that vacancy on short notice. Okay, so I really had planned for like weeks of dealing with showings and inquiries and reviewing applications and the whole process that we have to go through to be able to fill those vacancies. But that's not actually what happened here. And this was a very unique situation. And that's why I thought it would be important to be able to share it here. So with that, my goal is always to create that fastest turnover. This was not a unit that needed renovation. There was not really a lot of work that was going to need to be done in between there. I knew that this tenant had the property in rather good condition. So with other times that tenants will move out, I will start planning the work that I need to do to turn over that unit during that time as we're getting closer to that tenant leaving, meaning I'm going to have my contractor ready. I'm going to have any materials that I need to be ready. I'm going to line up all those things for those repairs. But I knew that that was actually not the case for this tenant. So I felt like it would be fairly easy from that perspective. But still, there's things that have to go into that tenant turnover. And the most important piece of that is to be able to find the person that now is going to get those set of keys. And this is something that I see in Lady Landlords tends to be a really strong place of anxiety for a lot of our members. And I get it. We are now handing over the keys to that property. What does that mean? That means that somebody else is living there. They can trash it. They cannot pay rent. This might lead to evictions. What other problems are going to have? You're not only having an issue with wondering what the tenant's going to do in your property, but also what the property is going to do. There are just certain times that things break or things get worn down that we are just not expecting. The amount of water heaters that I've had to replace over the past year or two is a very big indication of that. But this is where I feel that a lot of women and lady landlords that I speak to are actually afraid to get into rentals because they're afraid of a tenant that's either not going to pay or cause problems or anything else kind of in that space. But it's also a very big time-consuming space. When we have to do a lot of showings, answering questions. If you have ever tried renting an apartment, especially if you tried using like Facebook Marketplace, you know you just get 1,000 messages. The second that you put up your listing, you will get messages back that will say, is this available? And you're like, I just posted about this. Of course it's still available. So there's a lot of those questions, or people asking you questions about things that are absolutely written, nice, bold, clear letters in your ad will still come over and ask you those questions. So it tends to not be one of the most favorite parts of a landlord's job just because of the anxiety that can come from possibly getting that wrong tenant in there. What ends up happening, we as landlords, we waste our time, we get frustrated, and sometimes I see poor decisions being made. Oh, this is taking forever. I don't want to go through this process anymore. Okay, let me just get it rented. This person is close enough. And that's really where things can go bad, okay? So I'm going to share just a few simple tips of what I do within my process that I feel might be helpful for something that you might want to consider implementing in yours. But this is what works for me. I'm also going to be talking more about this in our upcoming tenant management workshop that is happening on June 30th. If you have not registered for that, if you are interested in learning more about the proper way to screen a tenant and really putting those systems into place, put the letters TMC down in the chat, and I will make sure to send you over the registration link so you can join us. And I'm going to break down all of my systems there and walk through how I have been finding tenants for years. But here are just a few quick tips for you today. First, I always have my clear criteria. Before I even knew I was going to have a vacancy, before I even marketed anything, I already knew what I was looking for, okay? That's something. I am a huge Google Doc person. If you've been listening to our podcast for a while, you probably already know that. But one of the main things that I will do is I have a folder for every single unit that I have. And I always have in there, I have pictures ready to go. I have a video walkthrough ready to go. I have the lease that I use for that unit. I have everything already in that one spot with my ad ready to go as soon as I find out that I'm going to have a vacancy coming up. But in there, I list out, I have a document, all of what my criteria is for that specific unit. I have different properties in different countries, in different types of areas. So my criteria does have to look a little bit different for different properties. But I have my income requirements, my credit requirements, my occupancy limits per my cities, all of those different things I have in this document so I know exactly what I am looking for. One thing that really scares me in our Lady Landlords Facebook community is when people will make posts saying, hey, I have these 2 tenants, or hey, I got an application. Should I accept this amount of people? Or is this income good? Is this credit score good? We should not be thinking about those things after our ad is already up. This is where we're going to have a lot of problems and can possibly open ourselves up to fair housing issues, okay? We want to make sure that we have these things set out before our ad even goes. So you need to make sure that you understand your criteria, because honestly, how can you find something if you don't know what you're actually looking for? So take a few minutes right when we finish up and wrap up this episode here. Sit down and just scribble out quickly, even if it's just on a piece of paper, even if it's on a napkin, throw it in your notes in your phone. But sit there and think for just 5 minutes on what is the actual criteria that you were looking for your next vacancy. Make sure to have that clear before going into anything like this. The second thing that I always do is I use a pre-screening questionnaire. Many women in our community already have this. If you do not and you would love a copy of my pre-screening questionnaire, I'm always happy to share it. Just drop the letters PSQ down in the comments and I will send you over what my pre-screening questionnaire looks like. But what this does is this saves me time from having to do showings for people that are not qualified for my apartment. You might also know that most of my apartments are not near where I currently live right now. And sometimes I'm in a foreign country for the winters, not near my rentals then. And I will still manage and rent my properties from anywhere in the world. I am not just going to go and meet somebody, also kind of from some safety perspectives here. I'm not just going to meet anybody and show them a property unless I know quite a bit about them and know, most importantly, that they are qualified, okay? Some of the questions that I'll ask is, when are they actually looking to move? My markets move fast, okay? Most of my rental properties are just outside of New York City. I can usually find somebody within a week or two to be able to move in that property. But that's not going to be the same in everybody's market. If I now have a vacancy coming up in July and somebody is saying that they're looking for September, well, that's not going to be a fit for me because I want to make money July and August, and I'm not going to hold something for September. Okay, I might have another vacancy for them, but that's not going to work in my market. People are looking to move fast, and I need to be sure of that. I also like to make sure that I am checking for occupancy. If I have a family of 7 apply for a studio, well, my city is not going to allow that. That is not going to work for me. The biggest place right now that I feel that most of my tenants are being disqualified from is due to income, okay? Now, owning my properties in New York means that I do accept Section 8, vouchers, anything like that, and that is something that we have to do as state. We cannot discriminate where that source of funds come from, right? So income from a day job and Section 8 funds are considered exactly the same. So we do need to make sure that we think about that factor. That is state dependent, but this is New York. But what I'm actually seeing a lot is still tenants that do not meet income qualifications. What I mean by that is, for example, the unit will be $2,000 a month and they're applying, but yet their income is only $1,500 a month. Well, that leaves somebody only $500 a month to live on. that's not going to work, right? That's between groceries, gas these days. Come on, that $500, especially in a place like New York, that's being eaten up. So one of the places that I'm really seeing is people that are applying for apartments when they don't have an income to support it, okay? I personally, my criteria is to have people not spend more than 30% of their income on their housing, okay? That's my criteria. That's a factor that works for me in my markets, and that's actually pretty standard also in my markets. Because of that, income verification, if I have somebody that's not even making $2,000 a month apply for an apartment that costs $2,000 a month, I am not going to show it to them. So we want to make sure that we are also getting that information up front. When are they looking to move in? You can also ask why they happen to be moving, right? Who's moving in? All of those different questions, we want to be able to collect up that information. Remember that we still need to make sure that we understand our fair housing. If you feel, that's too many people for this apartment, that's very different than if that location, if your city, if your municipality says that that is too many people. Okay, so please do make sure to know, one, if you are bound by fair housing guidelines. There are very few exceptions, but there are some. And then two, also what those things are. Okay, we need to make sure that we ensure that. But for this situation, I was able to put up my ad once again. As soon as I found out, I was able to do that very quickly because I had everything ready to go for that ad once I realized that that tenant was not going to be renewing. Then I was able to collect up people's information for my pre-screening questionnaire and see who was qualified. When I was going through those, to be honest, I did not get a lot of hits on this apartment. Normally this apartment goes so quick because it is a first floor apartment, which tends to be a little bit rare in my area in New York, right? Most people, not everybody wants to be walking up to 3, 4, 5 flights of stairs. The first floor usually is something that goes rather quick. This one I did not get as many hits as I normally do. And even out of that, I did not get a lot of people that either filled out the application or then qualified. But out of the 10 people that did fill out my pre-screening questionnaire, I had simply one that was a fit and that also responded, okay? I had a few more people that were qualified, but when I went to schedule a time with them, they didn't follow up. Now, I have a home. They don't. If they don't want to follow up, if they don't want to follow through, that's not going to be the tenant for me. I'm going to move forward with someone that is a fit. So I then set up that scheduling of a showing to show that one tenant that was actually qualified. That was all it took. He saw pictures, he saw video walkthrough, he had all of the information that was clearly laid out in my ad. He knew that he was qualified and he had all the answers to his questions because I gave him that information first. Then he gave me the information that I needed to know that he would actually qualify. I knew who was moving in. I knew what his income was. He had actually sent me, I did not ask for them, but he had actually already sent me pay stubs. So I even knew that he was qualified from that perspective. So really all we had to do was just kind of get together and just double check everything. It sped up the process so much easier because we had that information and had already walked through all of the different details. I see a lot in Lady Landlords, people either chasing tenants or wanting to get on phone calls with them. I feel like this is either a place where I see wasting of time, chasing tenants that maybe aren't serious about it, or really then spending time doing showings with people that aren't qualified. Could you imagine if I chased those other 9 people that didn't follow up and didn't respond to me, but then also had just shown them and scheduled that time, made the drive, this apartment happened to be about an hour away from where I currently live, took time out of my day, drove down there for the hour, waited for them, didn't know if they were actually even going to show because they already weren't serious about following through. Maybe I completely wasted my time in that. And then all of a sudden had somebody come in, absolutely love the apartment, and then, hey, they didn't have the credit score that was going to fit, or they didn't have the income that wasn't going to fit. And I could have known those things up front. I also would have been wasting my time chasing people that weren't serious rather than focusing on really communicating with the one person that was following through. To me, it made more sense to continue to lean into a person that was there, that was also saying, hey, this is something that I'm really interested in. Once we're able to do that, I easily sent out an application. I use electronic applications. Great. A tenant actually pays directly to be able to have their credit score done and to have that background check. I always do that after. I get this question a lot in Lady Landlords about when to do a background check and a credit check. That to me comes after the showing. You use your pre-screening questionnaire to really make sure that they are going to qualify for the apartment. Then after the showing, now is when I say, hey, it's time to pay for a credit check. Now it's time to get that background check done. To be honest, in these days where so much is done online and there is so much identity theft and there's so many scams online, I feel like having somebody try to pay for a credit and background check before they've even seen the apartment, one, it comes off very scammy. It sounds like I'm already trying to just take money from them. And two, you also usually have to kind of hand over some personal information, and that's a bit more in depth. And I feel that you're just going to lose people. Trust me, if you've ever used a pre-screening questionnaire, it's hard enough to get people to fill that out. Now trying to get people to fill out a full application, provide a social security number, agree to a background check before they've even seen the property, you're going to absolutely lose people. You're not going to have people do that, or you're going to come off as somebody scamming, spamming, which then might get you kicked off platforms where you are putting your listings like a Zillow or a Facebook Marketplace. So pre-screening questionnaire goes before, then showing, then full application process. Once that application's done, it's really just that due diligence. With this one particular person that had applied for the apartment, they had given me most of that information already in the pre-screening. It was much easier for me to start verifying things even at that standpoint. But through my application, I do a credit check, I do background check, I'm able to get back pay stubs. If somebody is self-employed, then I will also ask for tax returns because I need to actually see what they do claim that they make, right? I can't just take that number as standard. One of the other questions I get often in Lady Landlords is about collecting bank statements. I usually do not do bank statements. That doesn't really tell me much information. All because somebody has a lump sum or big savings in their account now doesn't actually mean that that's going to help me in the future. Sometimes I have used bank statements to be able to help verify direct deposits. That is something, once again, a lot of people get pay stubs in very different ways these days, or direct deposits. So sometimes bank statements can be helpful. The most important thing with asking for bank statements is that's either a part of your process or it's not. If you want bank statements, you have to ask all applicants for bank statements. It can't just be something that you can pick and choose. All tenants, regardless of if they have W-2 jobs, 1099, self-employed, if they, once again, have a housing voucher, everybody really needs to be treated equally, and the criteria should be exactly the same. So if you want bank statements, then everybody has to give you bank statements, and it's incredibly important to make sure that you are always doing things the same across the board, okay? But I would really encourage you to think about why it is that you're asking for those certain things. Everything that I ask for, there is a reason. There is some type of need that I have as a landlord that I'm looking for a piece of data when I ask for a tenant to admit something. So if you are asking for bank statements, once again, I do encourage you to think about what that reason is and then use that data to be able to make your decisions based on. We don't want to be making decisions off of sob stories from people. They're pressuring us to be able to need to move, but really saying, I took my time, did my due diligence, I can verify all the information that I received, and therefore you can move forward. With what I did in this process, it's not that I just happened to get lucky with finding one person that applied. It's because every step of my process saved me time, saved me money, and weeded out people that were actually wrong. I was filtering through people at the very beginning. I had my criteria set, and I followed my process of what I really have written out kind of as my SOP, really as my standard operating procedure for how I run my business. And I've had those things in place from the very first tenant that I had to now having 17 different rentals. The process has improved. It absolutely has gotten modified over the years, but that process is still documented and continues to stay the same every single time I have a new vacancy come up. The reason I like this is because it absolutely reduces my stress by having those systems in place and knowing how I'm going to handle all of those tenants. That consistency gives me confidence that I know what to do, that I know how much time commitment is going to be involved in finding this, And I know how my decisions are going to be made. It's not going to be, with the story of why somebody needs to move, but really, what is the data telling me? And that's something that really takes us from just being in a spot where like, hey, it's a tip to do these things, or hey, it's helpful to do these things, to really being able to say, this is a standard for me as a real estate investor. This is not just a hobby. This is not just something that I'm okay if I lose money on that. But rentals are how I make my money. Even when I still had a full-time job, I relied on the income coming in from my rental business. And because of that, we need to think like investors and act like investors. So if that is something that you are looking to improve your tenant management systems, or even possibly create them from the first time and get that system into place, and I get it. I was back there with the first rental that I had, and I remember running around just being like, oh my God, I need a lease. Oh my God, how am I going to find a tenant? Where am I going to market this? What am I supposed to say in an ad? How am I supposed to take pictures? All of those things. What I'm doing on June 30th is I am going to be teaching a tenant screening workshop, okay? We're going to come together, we're going to put those systems, we're actually going to build those systems together on the call. We're going to talk about how to fill your vacancies fast, but with the right tenants in place. How to make sure that we are marketing them the right way. How are we screening these tenants? How are we doing that due diligence? How are we setting up those boundaries from the very beginning with tenants, so that way we're not running all over the place and also getting calls or text messages when we're on vacation in the evenings, especially now during summer. So if that is something that you're interested in doing, if you would like to join our tenant screening workshop, put the letters TMC down in the chat box and I will send you the registration link. Otherwise, if you have any other questions about tenant screening, tenant management in general, feel free to drop them down in the comments and I will make sure to come back and answer them. Or I might even make a whole episode over here for the Lady Landlords podcast about the very topic you asked for. Thank you so much for joining me today. I will see you next week for the next episode of the Lady Landlords podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Lady Landlords podcast. If you're feeling stuck in your real estate investing journey, visit lady-landlords.com to book a 15-minute orientation call with me and see if you're ready to join our mentorship program. Or you can subscribe to our newsletter and join our Facebook group for exclusive real estate investing tips and offers. Invest with confidence. Become a Lady Landlord today.